Uh,
We don't do great without organization. Hey everyone, I'm Superfizz. I am here with a bunch of my friends from EthStaker. I hope this is recording. We usually have Michael's help with our video engineering, but he is unavailable right now. But we're so excited to get this Pithos testnet running that we're just like, screw it, we're going to record it. So I'm here with EthStakers like Lamboshi, who you know is Nolan.
Hello.
Buddha, who you know is Buddha.
Hi.
Colfax, who is also runs Steakhouse.
Hey.
And so who wants to tell us what we're doing today?
So basically, Pithos put a guide together on how to connect with the new merge testnet. Basically, a 10 or 5-step guide on how to run the execution client, so the ETH1 node, which we know as GEF, for example, and also the consensus client, which is Lighthouse or Prism. What we don't have yet is the validator client and the keys, so we only have the beacon node and the GEF node, but those are coming soon as well.
Awesome. And so what we're going to demonstrate today, it really should take just a few minutes, is the installation of this merge client testnet from scratch. If you've ever tried to run some of this stuff, you might know that the hardest thing is getting the right environment. Like launching it is usually 1 or 2 commands, but getting to the place where you can launch it is kind of building from scratch. So right now I am updating a brand new installation of Ubuntu 20.04. I'm actually running this from a desktop install because I couldn't find my server install USB. And so the only package I've installed is OpenSSH, so I could dial into it from across the room. And then as soon as I started, I did an update and upgrade. I will post a link to these very simple instructions, or I would maybe not simple, they're verbose. They give you every command you'll need so that you don't have to try to figure it out as you go. The only thing this really requires is a good Docker install. And Docker is not difficult to set up, but there are a few commands, and those are going to be linked here. So Colfax, do you want to tell us what's the difference between, so we have this ETH1 execution layer and the ETH2 consensus layer. How do these two fit together?
That's a great question. So basically, the way Ethereum works right now is the execution layer is sort of what you know and love as Ethereum. So transactions being processed, interacting with smart contracts, etc. And the consensus layer is run by what's called proof of work. And that is the mechanism for how all these different nodes can agree on sort of what is true and what transactions are valid. And so as a user of Ethereum, though, what you normally are interacting with is sort of execution that happens on the Ethereum network. And so as a user, you're not actually going to notice too much difference after this merge happens or on this new net, because you're still going to be interacting with Ethereum as you know and love. But the consensus layer, which is what is currently proof of work, is going to be replaced with something called proof of stake, which if you're watching this video, you probably know what it is. And so Ethereum's not going anywhere. It's not going to change the way you interact with it very much, other than the fact that proof of stake is going to be what's used under the hood to decide on what transactions are valid versus proof of work. Is that awesome. A good answer?
Yeah, that's a perfect explanation. And that kind of, well, I'm still running updates in the background. I thought it was so valuable to actually run these updates live. It is still running in the background. As we're doing that, I want to show you that it's still going. I would like to pivot really quickly. Go ahead.
While you're running those updates, I was going to say I've never run that command before. I have run that command before. Had I not run that command before, what's going on your computer right now for this?
Sure. So this is, like I said, it's a fresh Ubuntu 20.04 desktop installation. We use 20.04. Even though it's a year old, it is the long-term support version of Ubuntu. So it's generally the favored build environment. And I'm really just installing all of the updates that have come out in the past, probably like 18 months for this build. It just takes a while, but I did want it to be as authentic as possible and show this. It should finish in a minute, but so this whole move to proof of stake, I think about it mostly in terms of power usage. Nolan, you had some really interesting tweets about that difference in power usage. Can you tell us why this change to proof of stake is such a big deal?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see probably a 99% or greater reduction in the power usage. And basically the reason for that is with proof of work, it's a race to see who can propose the next block. So basically that results in people amassing as much hash rate and using as much electricity as is possible. But with proof of stake, the next proposer is just randomly chosen. And in that case, it's not a race, and you don't need to have beefy hardware to try to win that race.
Awesome. Yeah. So it ends the arms race, which other cryptocurrencies, so we kind of think about two major generations of cryptocurrencies. There's the first generation, which is proof of work, which is Bitcoin. And then you have kind of the second generation, which I think of as the ETH killers. They are a lot of newer networks that do mostly like distributed proof of stake stuff, where they have like 20 nodes or 100 nodes, and they are distributed proof of stake, but they're not really proof of stake. Does anyone want to talk about how Ethereum solves that proof of stake problem without being what we know as a distributed proof of stake? And while we do that, I'm just going to reboot this box. I think it is the main view right now, so I'm going to reboot it, and it's going to be offline while I do that because I don't want to dox myself too hard. Buddha. I had a great question. What was that? I'm doing two things at one time. I was like, oh, that's a great question. Any of these guys can answer it. And everybody's like looking at each other. You all figure it out while I do this.
That's why I'm glad you didn't call on me. Take it away.
Yeah, I think I can't answer it in detail. I mean, you were basically asking what the difference between delegated proof of stake is.
Oh yeah.
And
it's
proof of stake.
It's the opportunity. It's the decentralization of the network. And that's the secret sauce, is that Ethereum exists as a truly decentralized network, where other networks exist as a group of delegates who actually control the network.
So what you're saying is that everybody who runs a validator in proof of stake on Ethereum is voting. You're not delegating your votes to a centralized group of smaller number of people, right?
Yep. And that's the value. Everyone wants to know, why is it 32 ETH that I have to stake with? And that's because it's the balance between having the most validators we can have on a network without having too many or too few. And 32 Ether is kind of the sweet spot. Right now, the proof of stake network has over 200,000 individual validators. And that is kind of an amazing feat. It also provides this really strong backbone for security, so that when proof of work is added onto that, we know that there are no individual actors who can really manipulate the network. That almost makes me want to talk about client diversity. I bet we'll get into that at some point. So kind of as I described, this is a fresh box. I ran sudo apt update and sudo apt dist upgrade. And the next thing I need to do is actually, we're going to use Docker. And so I need to create a group for Docker and add myself to that group. And essentially these directions are just going to be copy paste. You can look them up otherwise or understand what they mean. This just means modify the current user, add the group Docker to me. I'm ID 1000. To make this actually work super well, I have to reboot again. If I were smart, I would have just done one reboot, but And there are actually ways around that, but so that was like updating is the big thing. The next thing we're going to do is install Docker from the actual Docker repo. Now, if you're an Ubuntu user, you probably know that Ubuntu ships with a version of Docker in the repository. And it's not generally recommended for use. I quickly tried it with this, didn't have great luck with it. So I was like, I probably need to use the official version. And that just means installing some other stuff. So I'm going to hop back into that screen share. And really just going to copy a couple commands. I know that I'm going to need git. Colfax, what is git?
Git is essentially a tool that allows you to track versions of your software. Commonly used, and it's a tool that runs locally on your machine. Commonly, it's used with a website called GitHub, which essentially is like Google Docs for code. So you can collaborate with different people, see people's changes, have different versions of history. So Git is a tool where you can manage stuff locally, and then when you actually upload your code to a website like GitHub, other people can see what's going on too.
And the next couple lines, I'm just adding repo-specific stuff so that I can install the official version of Docker from Docker and not the one that's packaged with Ubuntu. And the real difference is just the version is very far behind in the official one. So this is going to give me Docker Community Edition, Docker Community Edition CLI, and container daemon. And I also need to install after this Docker Compose. And these are really just one-liners that I've copied from Docker Hub. I intend for them to be included in the instructions that are going to be linked on the bottom here. All right, so we have the environment set up. I can run Docker version somehow and Docker Compose version. And those are the things that I need. They don't necessarily need to be the exact same that I have, but if you find out that it's not working, that might be a good place to start. All right. Who wants to tell me about this line? It's kind of an important one.
Yeah, so this line.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Buddha. No, take it away.
It basically clones the repo from Pithos, which includes the scripts for pulling and starting the execution and beacon notifiers.
Great. And now I'm just handing off to his instructions that say, go here, create this directory, execution data beacon chain. And now I need to nano a file. Nano is just the easiest text editor that's available here. I need to edit pithos.vars. And what I need to do is enter my IP here. I'm going to stop the screen share while I do that, just so that I don't dox myself, because it's what I do.
How do you find your IP?
It shows up in logs later on too, by the way. Super fast.
Well, I'm kind of wrecked then. I guess I won't show them too long. Hey, Buddha, will you talk about how you got the IP?
Yeah, you can run curl space ifconfig.me, which returns the IP, and then you just paste it in there.
And when you're talking about your IP address, you're talking about your public facing IP address, or like if I'm behind a router, do I want like the IP address of my machine?
Good question. I believe it's the public IP. It doesn't say the docs. Yeah, I mean the other one doesn't make sense. So
yeah, it's the public IP address. If you go to a website too called like what is it? What's my IP address.com, I think.
What is my IP? Yeah.
It'll tell you what the internet thinks your IP address is.
Buddha forgets we're doing education sometimes, and he's like, everybody knows that. But yeah, so we definitely want the external facing IP. Not your computer's going to have an IP like 192.168.1.4 or something, but we're looking for the internet IP. So I have modified that pithos.vars, and Wow, we are already there. I can copy this one-liner to start the Docker Compose. The environment file is pithos.variables, and the configuration file is dockercompose.geth.yml. What ETH1 client are we going to launch here?
I don't know if the other ones are supported.
Yeah, I think Geth is the only one supported, but there are. Nolan said that he tried other ETH2 clients.
I have a quick question. What do you mean by ETH1 client? Earlier we were talking about consensus and execution.
Yeah, and that's maybe I will definitely get into client diversity as soon as we wrap that up. There are a few ETH1 clients: Besu, Nethermind, Aragon, Open Ethereum, but by far the most popular is Geth. I think it has about over maybe 70% of the clients, or 70% of operators use Geth, even though there are 4 or 5 different clients. In a minute, we're going to switch to talking about ETH2 clients, and that's where I want to get into diversity. But the important thing to know is ETH1 clients have lower diversity, but they've also been live and kind of calcified for about 6 years, whereas ETH2 clients are relatively new and they are still error prone. And the important thing there is it's much more dangerous to rely on one client for ETH2 because it's so new, or for proof of stake. Whereas with the current proof of work network, we have a lot more clock hours or Lindy hours to say this works. Lindy hours being like the longer something runs, the longer it's likely to run. So when something is running for 6 years, you can kind of say, oh, it's probably going to work tomorrow. But if it's been up for like 2 hours, you're like, I don't know if it's going to work tomorrow. So we just used Docker Compose to create this Geth. And now I'm going to launch another command. And this is going to throw up a Lighthouse version. And so in the background now with Docker, they are running, and we're going to view log files in just a minute. No, sorry, that doesn't work that way. The thing that I want to get to really quick. So we have two images running. We have the consensus layer, which is Lighthouse Beacon, and we have the execution layer, which is Geth. We formally know these kind of like ETH1 and ETH2, but technically we like to call them consensus and execution. So with all of that done, there's also, I'm not great. Let's do, is it Docker log / follow Lighthouse Beacon? Will that work? It's not going to work, is it? What's the command for that? Let me stop sharing my screen and go.
Is Docker logs Lighthouse _beacon -f.
Yeah, I'm copying it. What did I do wrong? Docker logs. Oh, I did log. Okay. And so now what we see is I'm following the beacon chain log. Oh,
I don't see your screen there.
Yeah, get to that. In fact, I'm going to Control C so we can get back to it. And share screen. All right. Let's see what this chat message is. Oh, great, thank you. So Docker logs -f Lighthouse Beacon, and I'm now following the Lighthouse log showing that we are connected. We are on epoch 82, which tells you this network is brand new. Some of you know a little more about this, and someone mentioned it earlier. Who is running these validators, and when will we be able to interact with it more?
I don't know who's running it, but probably just the client devs to test it. And the average user, us, will probably be able to send transactions next week. And I'm not sure when we will be able to launch our own validators, but I think it would be shortly after that.
Great.
So we will need to set up a Launchpad website and yeah.
Okay, great. I want to rant for client diversity about client diversity just as we're wrapping this up. We chose Lighthouse here, and the big issue with client diversity is that we have 4, 5 if you include Lodestar, which Lodestar is still kind of ramping up. 4 clients being Prism, Lighthouse, Nimbus, and Teku. And right now we know that Prism has the majority of the validators. They have probably about 65%. And so what we're looking at, let's say Lighthouse had the majority and we were running Lighthouse. If this client encountered an error, and let's say it had 66% of the network, a super majority, it could bring the network to a halt. And so what we're working to do is to get any majority client down below 50% so that there's no risk of, or not no risk, there's less risk of halting the network if any one client has too many validators. Ideally, we want them to be below 33%. But for our first benchmark, right now it's October 2021. By December 2021, the goal is to get Prism below 50% so that we can have high confidence that when we do send this chain live, that if Prism halts, that the network will continue finalizing. Any other thoughts on that?
Oh, that was a good description. If I'm running a majority client, are there any guides available for me to follow?
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Or like, how would I go about switching?
So I would say,
and what are the risks too? So.
Oh yeah, these are great questions. So first off, I would say, I would encourage you to switch to Nimbus. And the reason I'm encouraging Nimbus is because it's a lightweight client that runs on almost any hardware. We joke about it being able to run on a toaster. It actually does run on a Raspberry Pi. And it runs on single core devices. So any lightweight device can run Nimbus. And there are guides available on EthStaker. Right now, the pinned post on EthStaker, that's reddit.com/r/EthStaker, is a list of client switching guides. Nimbus actually puts out a great guide for switching from any client to Nimbus. Now, because Nimbus is so lightweight, you could technically, while you're still on your validator, you can install Nimbus and get it synced up while you're running your existing validator. And then when it's synced up, literally all you have to do is turn off your old validator, remove it very well, make sure there's no trace of it still running. I would encourage you to wait 15, 20 minutes. I would probably wait an hour just because I'm like that. And then import those keys into Nimbus and you're up and running. So with that scenario, your total downtime is really technically 13, 15 minutes. For me, it would be an hour. It's so important to make sure that your old validator is no longer running, because the risk here is that if you're running Nimbus and Prism at the same time, that they will both send information to the network that will be seen as contradictory, and that could lead to a slashing. So I know that sounds scary. The risk really is very low if you're careful. So for example, if you have Prism running in Docker, you'll need to make sure it's completely removed and make sure that it doesn't restart when you start your machine. You want it just completely gone. But as long as you verify that carefully, and maybe even if you're not sure, ask for help and say, hey, can you help me verify that? Then you have nothing to worry about. But one of the best ways to verify that is to let your machine run and watch the beacon chain for missed attestations. Because if Prism is down and it's not attesting, and then maybe you rebooted it and you check again to make sure it doesn't start with Docker, and you're not attesting, then you know that you can start Nimbus and begin validating there. Sure. No one has asked to share his screen, so I'm going to cut this out.
Awesome. That's a great explanation, Piz.
Nolan, you're a co-host now.
So this is Lighthouse, Lodestar, Teku, and Geth running all at the same time. And after we finish the video, I'm going to try to get some of the more execution layer nodes up and running. But yeah, the testnet seems to be working well. Everything's ticking along nicely here.
Do you have an idea? What are we looking for? How can we know that things are successful and that we haven't melted down completely?
Well, I'm not really seeing any error messages, and all three of the consensus clients are on slot 2659. So
yeah,
they're all showing synced. So it's looking good.
I would agree that being on the same slot is a great indicator of being on the same network. One of the first things we look for in a new network is like divergence in slot counts. So that's really gorgeous. Did you screenshot that?
No, not yet. I'll have to tweet it.
Yes. All right. Do we want to share anything else, guys?
Good.
I think that's it.
That's
All
it.
right. So the new network is called Pithos. We got great instructions from Pithos. And I will take the extensive, exhaustive instructions and put them in a GitHub. And so in the bottom of this, you'll see a link to my instructions and Pithos's original instructions, depending on your skill level of what you want to work with. So ideally, anyone can get this up and running.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, guys, for joining me. I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you.
And take care, everyone. Yeah,